Hey, have you ever had a boss who made your life difficult, maybe even miserable? And not because of the work they gave you, but because of who they are? Well, whether or not they were just clueless or allergic to confrontation or a little self-obsessed, learning how to manage these kind of bosses is a survival skill. Hi, I'm Abbajay. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In part 2 of our conversations on managing up, we're going to talk about how to manage up, how to navigate some particularly tricky kinds of difficult bosses. Particularly, we're going to talk about the narcissist, the pushover, and the incompetent. And whether or not you have one of these now or you might in the future, we're going to talk about how not only to survive with these types of bosses, but how you could potentially thrive. But before we get into these particular pesky little boss types, let's talk for a minute about what managing up is and what it isn't. Managing up is not about sucking up. It's not about being a sycophant. Managing up isn't about managing the person either. Managing up is about managing the relationship that you have with your boss and the people above you in the food chain, which, by the way, are some of the most important relationships that you have for career success. Managing up is about doing what you can do from where you sit in that relationship to make it as effective, as productive, and as positive as possible. It's about understanding and learning and then adapting to your boss's style, their communication preferences, and their collaboration preferences. It's about being able to work constructively with the boss you actually have and not the boss you wish you had. It's about being able to build influence within your workplace regardless of who is in charge. Okay, now let's get going with talking about some of these difficult, pesky boss types. Okay, let's start off talking about the incompetent boss. Oof. We all know this one. You know the type. They're promoted way beyond their skill set. They make unclear decisions, bad decisions, no decisions, and they often lean on you to do the heavy lifting. You know, there's a lot of reasons why they may be incompetent. They might be new to the job. They may lack the technical skills. They may lack the people skills. They may lack all the skills that it takes to be a good manager. And the worst part of an incompetent boss is that their incompetence can trickle down and hurt your performance and, quite frankly, your reputation in the workplace. So how do you deal with an incompetent boss? Well, it's not easy, but I'm going to give you a few tips that you can try. In fact, you can try them today. You can try them as soon as you get off this video so that you can manage up and try to survive and even thrive with an incompetent boss. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with an incompetent boss is assess the incompetence. You've got to understand exactly what you are dealing with. So look for the specific gaps in their managerial skills. Are they disorganized? Are they poor communicators? Do they lack the technical knowledge or the technical expertise to manage your job and your tasks? Perhaps they're conflict averse or indecisive. Whatever it is, you've got to really the more you can pinpoint it, the better that you can then tailor your approach and your strategies accordingly. The second thing I want you to do, and this is probably the most important, is you have to adjust your expectations and your attitude. I know, it's not fair. It sucks to have an incompetent boss, but if you go into this situation with the attitude of you suck, I know better, that's going to prevent you from actually being smart and strategic in how you choose to navigate them. So make sure that you focus, first of all, on what you can control. And guess what? You can only control you. You only have control over your actions, your reactions, your interactions. Stop trying to change who they are. Just focus on what you can control. Number 2 in this area is, you know what? Give a little grace. And what I mean by this is if they're incompetent because they're new, give them a little bit of time to learn the job. You want to go in as an ally, not an enemy. I want you to think about the time that you did something for the first time. Did you suck at it? You probably weren't perfect. I've talked to hundreds of thousands of bosses who have all copped to being a little bit incompetent to a lot incompetent in their first managerial role. So make sure you give a little bit of grace. Use this situation as an opportunity to develop some patience, some better communication, and some resilience. So adjust your expectations and adjust your attitude, and that will really help put you in the mind frame that you need to be in to actually navigate an incompetent boss. All right, number 3 is really about then being proactive. One of the things you're going to have to do is really make sure that you are being clear about your expectations and needs constantly. So for example, if your incompetent boss gives you vague directions, follow up, get clarity. If they're not giving you clear priorities, you know what? Follow up, ask them directly, really have those conversations about what the priorities are. Explain the trade-offs to them. What you need to do with an incompetent, especially if they're creating some chaos, is to bring clarity to that chaos. The 4th tip I have for you is you do kind of want to be an ally, right? As I said before. So this means offering some guidance without judgy. Leave your judginess at home. Instead, really become sort of a coach to your boss. So if your boss doesn't know what to do next, or they seem perplexed or confused, make suggestions. Say things like, you know what, in the past, we have found that this really works well. Or if there's a new project, say to them, hey, you know, how about if I do an initial draft or a timeline? Would that be helpful if I crafted this to kickstart this project? So you want to offer guidance. You want to offer support without judgment. Help them understand, if they're new to the organization, help them understand what works in the organization. Tell them stories about past successes or past failures of perhaps other people in this role. So really put yourself as an ally to this incompetent boss, because quite frankly, you kind of do need them to succeed. And if their success influences your success, then part of what you're going to do is help them succeed so that you can succeed. The 5th thing I'm going to ask you to do is, of course, a little CYA. You don't want to let an incompetent boss actually derail your career. So make sure that you are keeping them in the loop. Follow up meetings in writing with summaries, clarify things in writing, make sure assignments are clearly understood. Always ensure that everything is sort of CYA'd, cover your ass a little bit so that you can protect yourself. My final piece of advice for an incompetent is you have to know when to escalate or when to exit. So if their behavior crosses into, say, negligence or ethical issues, or is putting people's lives in danger or your career at risk, you may have to escalate. And escalating can be tricky, I'm not going to lie. You have to know how to escalate professionally and to whom to escalate to. It might be your HR person, it might be a colleague, it might be that person's boss, but you have to be really careful that the escalation is done in a way where there's documentation and that you are actually willing, if you escalate, you're willing to leave the organization as well. Many years ago, I was working for a museum. And our museum was in partnership with a profit organization to create a big program. We were actually producing a circus. And the woman that I was reporting to on this project was a fucking disaster. She sucked, and she was way behind all timelines. She was making really bad decisions, and it was a mess. And I was very nervous about it. I couldn't tell my boss about it because my boss thought the sun may rise and set on this stupid woman. But the partners were getting concerned, our partners on this project. So one day the partners said, hey, Mary, we're really concerned about this timeline. Well, that's all I needed. I sang like a rat off a sinking ship. I escalated this out, I ratted this woman out, and guess what? In 24 hours, she was fired because the partners were like, we can't have this incompetence. So that was a story. Maybe it's a story of cautionary tale, but you do have to be very careful about how you escalate. And of course, you can always begin planning to move to make your exit if the environment becomes too toxic or the incompetent behavior becomes too dangerous to others, yourself, or the organization. So those are my ideas for the incompetent boss. Hopefully you'll never have to have one, but I'm guessing you probably will at some point. Okay, my friends, now it's time to talk about our second difficult boss of the day, and that is the pushover boss. I get it. At first, this boss seems like a dream, right? They're nice, they're easygoing, they're agreeable. But then you realize they're like the noodle men, right? These bosses don't lead, they float. They don't make hard decisions. They don't stick to their decisions. They don't enforce rules. They don't monitor actions. And when conflict arises, poof, they disappear. Pushover bosses don't lead, they float. And that can lead to a lack of team direction, a lack of productivity, and overall confusion. Your job, whether you like it or not, is to help them lead better while keeping the team and you and your work on track. I'm going to give you a few key strategies to help toughen up that pushover boss. Okay, so working with a pushover boss, you're going to try to instill a little firmness in them, right? Or a little confidence in them. In some ways, this is going to be similar to the incompetent boss, but with this, it's really more about kind of beefing them up and being sort of the backbone, giving the backbone, providing the backbone, helping grow their backbone that they don't have. So the first thing I want you to be able to do is really make sure that you are clarifying priorities. Don't wait for them. Pushover bosses often say yes to everything, and then everything's a priority and leaves the team overloaded and directionless. So you want to really ask directly about priorities. Priorities, that was hard to say today. Priorities, people. So things like, hey boss, hey pushover, which of these 3 projects are most important this week? And if they're like pushing around, give them a reason. Say like, I think we should focus on this because of X, Y, Z. Also present trade-offs if they're saying yes to everything. Say if we take on this new project, then we're gonna have to put this and this on the back burner. Is that gonna be okay? Provide a little context. It can also be helpful to confirm in writing. You know I'm a big fan of confirming in email, not in texting, but in email, to be able to anchor some accountability and to be able to remind them of what decision they actually made. My second tip for you is to really offer some structured initiative because pushover bosses can tend to have things a little bit chaotic. Make sure that you're the one that's taking the first step into certain tasks. Be the one to draft agendas, be the one to propose plans, be the one to help guide the workflow. When you do this, you also want to loop them in. So let's say you propose a plan of action, loop them in. Here are my thoughts for starting or kicking off the Penske project. How is it okay to proceed? Or are you good with this plan of action? Frame decisions as things that will benefit them and the teams. Remember, one of the things that pushover bosses do very poorly is stick to their decisions. They're often swayed by other thoughts. So make sure you're giving them context about the decisions that you want them to make. So saying like, hey, if we do the Penske project, this is going to help us, our team, and our organization by 1, 2, 3. Give them some good kind of backbone context to stick to decisions. My third piece of advice for the pushover is to help them be a better decision maker. Support their decision-making process. Pushover bosses tend to change their minds a lot, or they don't make decisions. So one thing you can do is to ask like clear, directive questions like, would you prefer X, Y, and Z? Right? And if they say X and you think it's a good decision, then say that's a great decision. I completely agree. But let's say they choose a decision that you don't think is the right one. Let's say they choose Y. Then you come back and you make a case for another decision. Something like, oh, I can see how you would like Y. My thinking is we should do X because boom, boom, boom. Give some solid context for the right decision. So you want to really applaud correct decisions that you agree with, and you do want to help them shape decisions that are going off the rails. Remember, they're a pushover. They're going to be open to your thought if it's delivered in a way that's constructive, agreeable, and polite. This also means number 4 is that you want to support their leadership. And this can be tricky because pushovers can be really annoying. So you want to make sure that you are explicitly saying things like in meetings like boosting their confidence, great job, boss, I really appreciate that. Don't go over the top. I'm not asking you to suck up, but what I am asking you to do is help bolster their confidence. That's what happens with pushovers. They often have a lack of confidence or they feel like they need to please everybody. So support their leadership and support their decision making. The 5th tip and my final tip for the pushover is you do have to mitigate the risks. So pushover boss may not defend you when things go wrong, or they may not take your side in conflict. So make sure you have a plan for that. Make sure you have a plan for self-advocacy. Make sure you are building support throughout the organization, especially should you land in a tough situation. You want to make sure there are other people that will stand up for you. It might be your teammates, it might be another manager, it might be your boss's boss, but make sure you have a plan for self-advocacy. And also remind yourself that these bosses are human and they may be struggling. So stay direct, stay supportive, stay polite, but also stay firm. Okay, so let's talk about the narcissist, right? How do you manage up to a narcissistic boss? And you know who I'm talking about. This is the person whose ego is as big as the solar system. This is the person who's not confident that they're arrogant. This is the person that craves admiration. They crave praise. They crave being the center of attention. This is the person that makes everything about them, leaving you much diminished in your role. Now, the thing about narcissism is that it is a spectrum, so you've got to be aware of this. So we all are a little bit narcissistic, right? We all have a little bit of ego, but when we're talking about a narcissistic boss, we're talking about someone who's gone way over the edge, whose whole realm of being is all about themselves. Managing up to this type of boss is very difficult and a little bit tricky. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can manage up to a narcissistic boss and keep your sanity and your self-respect and, of course, your dignity. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of strategies that you can use when you're dealing with a narcissistic boss it won't cure their dysfunction, but hopefully it will create enough space for you to be successful with that person. And by the way, narcissists, even though they're really difficult to work for, narcissists tend to be very successful people. So if you can figure out a way to work with the narcissist and still keep your self-respect, you could actually accomplish a lot of great things. So the first thing you want to do with a narcissist is really try to understand what drives them. Narcissist bosses are often fueled by a need to feel important, a desire for control, sensitivity to criticism. They don't like to be criticized, so when you're giving them criticism or critique, you're going to be very careful. So understanding what their needs are, what's driving their narcissism, can help you kind of shape your interactions with them and choose your strategies with them so that you don't like, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't poke the bear. All right. So once we understand what drives them, the second thing is, and you're going to hate this because I know I keep telling you that managing up isn't about sucking up. This is the exception to the rule. So you are going to have to appeal to their ego. I want you to be strategic about it, but remember, their ego is everything. So I do want you to use flattery, but sparingly and purposefully, and hopefully in a way that actually feels authentic. So praise their ideas when you can honestly do so. Something like, your insight in that meeting really helped frame that conversation. If you mean it, say it. If you don't mean it, maybe you don't say it, but you will get along better with a narcissist if you can find some things about them that they do well. Now, it goes into suck-upness, sycophancy, when you're just praising them all the time for no reason. So see if you can't find some things that you actually do appreciate about them, the things that they actually do bring to the table that work, that you can give a compliment to. A third idea for dealing with the narcissist is to, and listen up, this is really important, is to learn how to frame everything in terms of their wins, in terms of what's going to make them look good and make them be successful. So you want to link your work to their goals. You want to link your ideas to their goals. So for example, you might say something like, this project that you're proposing will be really helpful for you because this will help you to achieve this vision that you have. So link it to them. So this approach helps make them see what's in it for them. They are far more likely to greenlight something if they see how it benefits them. So remember, frame your ideas in terms of their wins. My fourth idea for the narcissist is, quite frankly, keep them in the loop. Not in the soup if you can help it, but keep them in the loop. Narcissist bosses hate surprises, so even small updates can help them feel in control. Remember, their ego is everything, and their ego can get bruised if there's a piece of information that they don't have. So keep them in the loop, not in the soup. All right, my fifth tip for the narcissist. Again, this is a very important one, so listen up. You want to stay visible, but not threatening. I know. I'm not asking you to make yourself small. I'm asking you to keep yourself from overshadowing them. Narcissists often feel very competitive with high performers. So you want to make sure you are showing up as a high performer, but you're showing up as a high performer who's there to serve them. There's a big difference. If you look around our political landscape, you're going to see some narcissists that get very threatened when someone else overshadows them. So try not to overshadow, try to serve with high performance. Document your achievements, share credit with others when possible. So for example, if I'm working for a narcissist and I just did something really big, I'm going to say to my boss, hey, the team and I just accomplished this. I'm not going to say, hey, I just did this. Don't out-narcissist the narcissist. Keep others also informed of your work. Make sure that those outside your boss's shadow know about how good you are at your stuff, because narcissist bosses may not always share your good work. So make sure other people know how valuable you are. So keep your network alive. Avoid showing them up in public. This is so important. Please don't correct your narcissist boss in public. Do it privately. Showing up a narcissist boss in public is really damaging to their ego, and it's going to be damaging to your career. If you do need to, like there's a meeting that's happening and the narcissist has something wrong, slip them a note. Try some other way to give them the information they need that isn't going to embarrass them. They'll never get over it, being embarrassed publicly. 6. Set your boundaries without confrontation. So this is when you want to be very diplomatic when you are trying to kind of set boundaries. So you can't be, direct conflict can be very triggering to a narcissist, so use some diplomacy. So for example, let's say they want you to do something that just can't be done in that deadline. Say something like this: to meet that deadline, I'm going to need to deprioritize X. How would you like me to proceed? Give them the trade-offs, give them the power to choose. So number 7 on my list of narcissistic managing up tactics or strategies is, you got to document everything. We've talked about this with our other bosses as well. So you really do want to make sure you are keeping a record of what you do and what decisions are made. Summarize things in writing. Keep records of instructions, of reviews, of deadlines. Narcissistic bosses can turn on you in a heartbeat. Make sure you're keeping records. Save your praise, save your positive feedback, save your positive reviews. When you're dealing with these difficult bosses, and quite frankly, an overly narcissistic boss is actually more of a toxic boss, make sure that you are really keeping things documented so that in case they decide at some point to flip the script on you, you have the records. And finally, as I just said, because narcissism can easily move into toxic behaviors, you do have to be on the lookout for gaslighting or really serious abusive behavior. So if they are constantly undermining you, if it becomes too toxic, then you're going to have to consider a couple of things. One, perhaps going to HR, or perhaps you're going to plan an exit plan. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to need to protect your reputation and protect your mental health, because this actually can move into more of a toxic situation. And we've talked about toxic bosses before. They are not good for you, they're not good for your health, and they're not good for your mental, professional, personal lives. And finally, remember, narcissism can be a toxic behavior. It can easily delve into gaslighting or to other abusive managerial practices. So you are going to need to make sure that you protect yourself, protect your mental health. Consider going to HR if you need to, or simply plan an exit. I think that working for a narcissistic boss is good for maybe a year or two, but after that, their narcissism will be really hard on you and your soul. So really make sure that you are planning an exit or planning a strategy that's going to keep you physically, mentally, and psychologically healthy. If you do need to confront a narcissistic boss, do so privately. Never confront a narcissistic boss publicly. I promise you it will not go well. And when you do, you want to make sure that you're using neutral, non-threatening language. So focus on managing their expectations, not their personality. You're not going to change a narcissist, but if you can understand what drives them and adjust your behavior accordingly, you could survive, and even worthwhile, you could even thrive with a narcissistic boss. Okay, my peeps, let's bring this all together. Whether you're working for an incompetent, a narcissist, or a pushover, managing up with these people is about finding ways to make the relationship work for your sanity and for your career success. Okay, quick recap on our difficult bosses today. For an incompetent boss, to manage up this person, you want to make sure you are clarifying your expectations and your needs. You are offering support without judgment or contempt, and you are protecting yourself with documentation. When you are with a narcissistic boss, you're going to appeal to their ego strategically. You're going to keep them informed and involved. You're going to track your accomplishments, and you're going to protect your mental health. You're not going to change these fuckers, so just work with what you have. And finally, with the pushover boss, take some initiative. provide structure, gently guide and reinforce their decision making, and also support their leadership publicly. All right, so I sincerely hope that you found this video helpful. And if you did find it helpful to navigate your difficult bosses, do me a quick favor. Hit the subscribe button below so that we can keep these tips coming to you. And I still want to hear from you. Which kinds of bosses have you had to navigate? What strategies have you used? What's worked? What hasn't? Drop us some comments below. Share your thoughts and your ideas. People, we can crowdsource this boss managing thing. And if you haven't seen part 1, go check it out, because it's going to help you understand how we got to part 2, right? If you like part 2, go see part 1. Okay, that's it for now. I can't wait to see you again. Good luck with your boss. When you manage up your career. Bye.